A stranger at the gate. Lyra hadn't felt her fingers in hours. They were there, numb and rigid inside frost-stiff gloves, pressed against a world that no longer wanted her. The wind in District 7 didn't howl, it scraped, dragging metal banners across ruined railings and whispering through shattered vents like a voice too tired to scream. Each gust cut deeper than the last, slicing past the thin layers she had patched together across too many cold nights. Her breath came in broken clouds, freezing on her lips as soon as it left her. There was no sky above her anymore, just a web of rusted piping, tangled power lines, and failing neon signs stuttering in and out of life. Once this district had held schools, apartments, healing centers. That was before the council redrew the border lines, before they lifted the city skyward and left the ground to rot. Now there was only silence and doors. She had knocked on 16 so far. Not one had opened. The 17th stood at the end of a narrow alley, its surface pitted with rust. She hesitated, her legs trembling beneath her, not from fear, she no longer had the strength for fear, but because the cold was winning. Still, she raised a hand. The knock was barely audible. A pause, then from inside a voice. Male, harsh, close. No exotics. The words hit harder than the wind. She staggered back a step, knees buckling. The snow didn't even cushion the fall, just swallowed her in silence. Her vision dimmed. She tried to breathe, but the air sliced down her throat like glass. Not, no visitors. Not, go away. The word had weight, it always did when they said it. Like she wasn't someone, just a mistake that walked and breathed and needed too much. She'd heard it before at border camps and transit stations, behind steel fences with drones that hovered just a second too long. Her species didn't even have a name here, not one they were allowed to speak aloud. She had indigo skin and silver-flecked hair. That was enough to mark her, enough to be refused. Her forehead touched the snow. She closed her eyes. A memory surfaced, uninvited, warm, cruel. Her brother back on the forest plains of Narissa, weaving light patterns in the air above her head before morning meditation. Your spirit glows when the universe speaks to you, he teased, tracing gentle lines of light. Listen with your heart, not your ears. That was the last time anyone had touched her with kindness. Lyra tried to move. Her arms felt like metal, her legs stone. Somewhere far away, something inside her whispered, get up. But the rest of her was sinking. This is where it ends, she thought. Not on a battlefield. Not with defiance or pride. Just here, alone in a dead street. Frozen like the others. One more statistic. But then, light. She didn't know why she opened her eyes, only that she did. Farther down the alley, through a curtain of falling snow, one door glowed. Not bright, not beckoning, but warm orange light filtered through narrow slats, diffused like heat through breath on glass. It was out of place. Alive in a place that had long since stopped pretending to be. Her body shifted, one movement, then another. She crawled at first, too weak to stand. Her knees dragged through slush, her hands scraped concrete. Pain returned with the motion, sharp and ragged, reminding her she was still alive. She clung to it. When she reached the door, she couldn't speak. Her lips cracked apart with the attempt. But she managed to lift her hand once more. She knocked. Inside, Theo Raines didn't react at first. He was deep beneath the floorboards, knee-deep in copper wiring and scorched insulation foam, rerouting power through a junction that was older than he was. The heating coil was acting up again, another flare-up and the entire boiler would blow. He didn't have another backup. The knock came again. He froze. No one knocked here, not in District 7. Not unless they were desperate or stupid or both. He waited, 1 second, 2. Another knock, fainter. He moved fast now, stripping off the arc gloves and climbing the ladder up into the main level of the shelter. The hallway was dim. He flicked the overhead switch. Nothing. The backup strips had gone cold. At the door, he listened. No voices. No weapons charging. No threats. He unlatched the first bolt, then the second. He opened the door, and for a moment, time staggered. She was on her knees, her frame too still, her arms hanging slack. The snow was gathering in her hair, long, silver-flecked strands that caught the orange furnace light like threads of starlight. Her skin, deep indigo and bruised around the joints, shimmered faintly beneath frost. She looked up. Her eyes were wide and dark and distant, but they found him. They saw him. And for a heartbeat, he saw something back. Not alien. Just someone about to die. He didn't think. He moved. Theo knelt, reaching for her arm. She flinched, not a full recoil, just a reflexive twitch. Her eyes didn't even narrow. There was no fight left. "I've got you," he muttered, voice rough from disuse. He slipped an arm under her shoulders and the other beneath her knees. She weighed nothing. She smelled like wind and blood and wet metal. He carried her inside. The door slammed behind him, and the air changed. Warmth pressed in from the furnace vents, flooding the narrow corridor with a low hum. He laid her on the salvaged mattress nearest the heat source and stripped her soaked coat. Her shirt clung to her skin, ice-locked in the seams. His hands hesitated, then steadied. He used the blade of his multi-tool to cut clean through the fabric, careful not to touch bare skin unless he had to. She was shaking violently now, signs of thaw setting in. Dangerous, but not fatal. Not yet. He wrapped her in 3 layers, an old solar blanket, then fleece, then thermal fiber. He tucked her arms close to her chest. She didn't speak. Her lips moved, but no sound came. He bent closer. "Why?" she whispered. The word hit him like a memory he tried to bury. Why? Because he used to be the one who sent people like her away. He exhaled, sitting back on his heels. Because no one else did. She blinked once, then again. Her eyes closed. He sat there long after her breathing had steadied. The heating coil ticked behind them, expanding. Outside, the city kept howling. But inside this rusted, forgotten room, under a roof barely held together with bolts and regret, something had changed. For the first time in a long time, Theo Raines hadn't said no. He had opened the door. And the question now, as he watched her sleep, was what it would cost him to keep it open. Shelter from the storm. The warmth hurt. Lyra wasn't prepared for that. It came not like a gift but like a punishment, flooding into limbs that had grown used to painlessness. The fire in her muscles felt cruel. Her spine ached from the slow thaw. Her stomach cramped as blood returned to her core. She gasped and clutched the blanket tighter around her body. Her body. She took inventory instinctively, as she always did upon waking somewhere new. Still dressed, though her outer layer was missing. Underneath the thermal wrap, her tunic clung to her skin, dry now, but stiff. A thick jacket had been placed beneath her head, cradling her neck. Her boots had been removed. Her feet were wrapped in warm cloth. She wasn't shackled. She wasn't dead. Her eyes opened slowly. The room was dim but functional. Pipes lined the ceiling, insulated in salvaged foam. Every inch of the space had a purpose, a wall of storage crates repurposed into a pantry, a workbench littered with circuit boards and copper coils, a sleeping mat pressed against a furnace vent that glowed with a steady orange pulse. This wasn't wealth. It was survival. And then she saw him. He sat at the edge of the room, facing the wall but turned just enough to watch her in the reflection of a bent metal panel. His profile was sharp, shadowed by stubble, auburn hair military short, jaw tight. Alert, but not aggressive. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Lyra sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. Her legs trembled beneath the blanket. He didn't move to stop her. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice a dry whisper. He turned. His expression was calm, unreadable. "Here," he said simply. "Safe enough for now." She held his gaze, unsure if she believed him. The last place she'd been told was safe had tried to register her as cargo. "I'm Theo Raines," he added. She said nothing. He rose and moved to the stove without fanfare. A blackened pot sat atop the rigged burner, releasing faint trails of steam into the chilled air. The scent was foreign but comforting, something root-based, salted, thick. He ladled the broth into a ceramic bowl, approached her, and placed it on the crate beside her bedding. Then stepped back. No orders, no pressure. Just silence and space. She eyed the bowl. Her stomach twisted. It could be drugged. It could be anything. But the hunger was real, sharp as a blade now that her body remembered what warmth felt like. Her hand shook as she picked it up. The heat made her hiss, but she didn't drop it. She drank in small, halting gulps. The first swallow burned. The second made her cough. By the third, her hands had steadied. He said nothing, just watched her until she was finished. She set the bowl down, breath shaky. "You found me," he said. "You knocked. I don't remember. You were almost unconscious. If you'd collapsed a few minutes earlier," his voice didn't trail off like a threat. It ended like a record of fact. A line on a report. She curled her feet under the blanket and looked down at her hands. The indigo of her skin had darkened in the cold, now it flushed with deep violet where circulation returned. No restraints. No commands. No questions about species or origin. Still, she couldn't help it. "Why did you open the door?" He stood quietly for a long time. Then he sat across from her, cross-legged near the heat. His posture not relaxed, but far from hostile. "I wasn't going to," he said. She looked at him again, this time more closely. His face was young but tired, not the kind of tired that came from lost sleep. The kind that soaked into bones. Regret, maybe. Or something worse. "I used to work for the council," he said. "Orbital Expansion Division. I reviewed settlement applications. Checked files. Signed denials." He paused, as if waiting for her to react. She didn't move. Her fingers had curled into the fabric of the blanket, but she said nothing. "I saw people like you every day," he continued. "Not in person. On screens. In data cells. You weren't even called people, just species codes. Biologics. Non-priority clearance." He didn't sound proud. He didn't sound defensive. "One family," he said, his voice a shade quieter, "was flagged for immediate relocation. I approved it. They were caught outside Zone 11 a week later. The guards wouldn't let them back in. They froze. Silence filled the room like mist, thick, suffocating. After that," he added, "I burned my identity chip. Walked away." He didn't look at her. "I thought disappearing would be enough. It wasn't." She hadn't realized she was holding her breath. She let it out slowly. His words didn't make sense to her. Or maybe they made too much sense. "You helped make this world," she said, voice even. "I helped keep it this way," he corrected. "Now what?" she asked. He met her eyes. "You stay here," he said. "Rest. Heal. Then decide." "I'm not staying. I didn't ask you to." They stared at each other across the flickering light. Something passed between them then, an unspoken understanding that neither of them could name. Not trust, not yet. But not hostility either. Something quieter. Shared exile. She shifted, drawing the blanket tighter. The warmth was starting to feel real now, less like a trick. He stood, walked to the corner, and returned with her coat, now dry, neatly folded. He set it down within arm's reach. Then he added, "If you plan to go, wait a day. Storm's coming." She didn't respond. He turned to leave, but at the doorway, he paused. "The door doesn't lock," he said over his shoulder. "Come and go as you like." She looked down at the bowl in her lap. No cage. No chains. And yet she didn't move. When she finally lay back down, the blanket felt heavier. The heat no longer startled her, it soaked in, slow and deep. She listened for footsteps. There were none. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't need to pretend she was already gone. The next morning came slowly. No sun rose over District 7. Light seeped through cracks in the ceiling, pale and sickly blue from the sky filters far above. The furnace had dimmed to an ember glow, low enough to preserve fuel, warm enough to keep frost from creeping in. The air still carried the faint sting of metal and cold concrete, but the space held its warmth like a held breath. Lyra woke without jerking for the first time in weeks. No alarms. No doors slamming open. No boots scraping asphalt. Just the distant hiss of heating coils and the sound of someone moving carefully across the room. She didn't sit up. She kept her eyes closed, listening. A drawer slid open. Tools clinked softly. Theo was working, not far, 10, maybe 12 paces from where she lay. She heard the rhythmic click of a voltage tester, the hiss of a solder tip against a fresh wire. Not surveillance. Not interrogation. Just maintenance. Eventually she stirred, stretching slowly under the blanket. Her limbs stiff but no longer numb. Her joints ached with something ordinary now, not the gnawing pain of cold, but the dull stiffness of recovery. Theo glanced over but said nothing. His attention returned to the wiring module he was hunched over, some kind of junction converter stripped down to its raw circuit board. She sat up and let the blanket fall from her shoulders. Her tunic clung to her arms, slightly wrinkled from sleep but dry. She reached for the jacket he'd left the night before, slipped it over her shoulders, and instinctively checked the seams. No tampering. No missing pieces. Just clean and warm. "I adjusted the cuffs," he said without looking up. They were stiff from ice. Her fingers paused on the sleeves. "Thank you," she said. Theo shrugged, still working. She stood slowly, balancing herself. Her legs felt unsteady but functional. It had been days since she'd stood without bracing against a wall. She crossed the room, passing the furnace, and stopped beside a small jug of water left on a metal shelf. She looked at him. "Boiled," he said. She drank. The metal cup was cold, but the water went down smooth. It settled in her stomach with a weight that made her briefly dizzy. Then hunger followed. He noticed. "There's more soup," he said. She nodded. He ladled a portion from the same pot as before, still simmering on the low flame. The smell was stronger this time, not rich, but fragrant in a way that suggested effort. A single clove of something sharp and spicy floated near the edge. She sat cross-legged on the floor, knees tucked in, and took the bowl with careful hands. He joined her without ceremony, sitting across from her and resting his elbows on his thighs. They ate in silence. It wasn't companionable, not yet, but it wasn't tense either. It was the silence of two people whose survival didn't require words. Two beings from different species who had, for the moment, accepted the simple truth: they were alive, indoors, warm. Lyra's spoon scraped the bottom of the bowl. She hesitated, then asked, "You live alone?" Theo nodded. "Too many people draw attention. Noise. Heat signatures. Smell." She studied him. You don't look like a man who's hiding. I'm not, he said. I'm waiting to stop being hunted. There was a beat of silence before he added, they don't care who I was anymore. They care that I vanished. You could have joined the towers, she said. Your kind always gets out. I chose the wrong side too late, he replied. And I didn't want out. I wanted away. Lyra tilted her head slightly. Is there a difference? He looked at her then, really looked, and for a flicker of a second, something passed behind his eyes. Not pity. Recognition. Yeah, he said. There is. She didn't push further. Instead, she stood and walked to the far wall, where a narrow vent hummed faintly behind old mesh. The warmth of the furnace was beginning to dissipate into the outer rooms, where the heat mattered more. You've reinforced the airlocks, she said, tracing one of the seals with her fingers. Partially. Enough to keep the cold out and scanners confused. Still need to finish the west side. You're not from here. Not originally. No one's from here anymore, Theo replied. She turned, arms folded loosely over her chest. Her voice was quiet, cautious. I was told not to come to District 7. I'm surprised they told you anything, he said. She gave a brief, dry breath, almost a laugh. They said only criminals and ghosts live down here. They were half right. A silence settled again. Then he asked, why did you come here, Lyra? Her name in his mouth caught her off guard, not because of how he said it, but because he'd remembered it. No one ever did. Usually they didn't ask, and if they did, it wasn't out of care. She hesitated. Because I ran out of other places, she said finally. He nodded. That made sense to him.